I got my first job out of college at a weekly farm newspaper, and I fell in love with agriculture, and I never left. You guys are great to talk to, you tell great stories, and I'm excited about what's going on in technology. And you have to realize that more has been done in technology and agriculture than Silicon Valley's even thought about doing. I like to tell people, all Silicon Valley did was make it smaller and lighter, and I have big fingers. I mean, that's not helping. So that's how it goes. But to get started here, I want to tell you a little bit more about me, and it says Penton on my card because we've been going through some changes. So I want to bring back a familiar name and show you who we really are. I am with Farm Progress. We are now Farm Progress. We are part of a company I'll explain in a moment, but our division is now Farm Progress. We brought that name back. We're not Penton anymore. I am so excited about that because people want to know what Farm Progress is. Penton sounds like something you get from your dog. Anyway, so Farm Progress is a big company, with the big division of a company. We do a lot of stuff. I'm just showing this stocking full of stuff that we do, but my main division is in content, and I work with a team of more than 50 people that report to me that do all of our brands. We have 17 state and regional magazines, 5 vertical publications, and I'll run through those really quick. We are owned by Informa. As of November, we were bought by a company out of England, Informa, and we are part of the Global Exhibitions division because we have the largest farm show in the country, Farm Progress, which starts next week. They're packing in right now, but I don't have to get there till Monday, and I'm excited about that. So anyway, this is who we are part of. We are now part of a major international public company, which means I have to be careful what I say apparently, but none of them are in here, so don't worry about that. That's where I'm going to go. And we are excited about that. We're still going through the transition of, new corporate credit cards and all that stuff. It's not exciting there. But anyway, this is the Midwest group of magazines you may be familiar with. I'm pretty sure you know what Michigan Farmer is, right? And all of you in Iowa know Wallace's Farmer, Prairie Farmer in Illinois, The Farmer in Minnesota. Those are all our publications. We also have a group that's our Southern group, the Farm Press group. They're part of our family. Those guys all work with me. Some of them are twice my age, but that's another story. We have the vertical publications of Corn and Soybean Digest and Farm Futures. I write for both of those. I write a tech column that appears in both of those now. And then we have our livestock books. And if you're in livestock, National Hog Farmer and Beef and those publications. So we also have the live events, which is, like I said, Farm Progress Show, but we also have Husker Harvest Days, which is the same size as the Farm Progress Show 2 weeks later. And it's quieter. Farm Progress Show is where everything gets introduced. And Husker Harvest Days is where I go learn everything because nobody's booking me. I can just go see everybody and spend time. Because bad news, I get to do the opening ceremonies at the Farm Progress Show all 3 days, right in front. So that's going to be exciting for me. Not for you, but for me. And then we have other groups, the Farm Futures Business Summit, the Ag Data Conference. I believe you were at the Ag Data Conference last year. We're doing that again this year in Coralville. And that's a unique look at beyond data. It's also a technology presentation. We do a lot of work there. I know Croftsilla's been involved with that before. And we try to present how this stuff works in the real world. So, before I get started, a little bit of where we're going and where we've been. Does anybody know what that is on the left? Corn. Yep, it's corn. You know what it is on the right? Corn. So on the left is 10,000 years. There's a 10,000 year time span between that piece of corn and that piece of corn. 10,000 years of barefoot farmers. What's that? GMO, that's right. 10,000 years of selecting for bigger kernels and realizing that if it's bigger kernels, it might be lower on the plant, and then selecting those, and when those grow, the plant goes, the kernels go lower and lower on the plant. 10,000 years of genetic modification to get to this. And then in the last 100 years, hybrid corn has gone all over the place. The way that's changed as well. But yeah, that's teosinte on the left and corn on the right. And so I like to start with that just to show that we've come a long way. We do it a lot faster now because it took 10,000 years to get this far. But remember, this is the big move. There's still a mystery as to why we stopped hunting and gathering and stopped and started raising crops. I blame beer, but that's a whole other story. There is actually a book called Red Beer and the Seeds of Change that was written by the ag engineer at the University of Illinois. It's a fascinating book about how we needed higher energy diets to do the things we needed to do, and it turned out grains and beer were part of that. And it's an interesting look at the different things in the major areas where agriculture started around the world. So as you can see, I've kind of been involved. I've enjoyed looking at ag technology from different perspectives. So let's start with 5. And I guess the first one, I'm going to stick with biotech for a minute, because biotech, it's great. 22 years ago, the first BT11 corn, Roundup Ready soybeans, that was so exciting. That was like Model A time, folks. It was like Grandpa's Model T coming off that first mass-produced assembly line that Henry Ford set up. They were great, they were exciting, but how they got there was pretty freaking crazy. Does anybody know how we used to modify a corn plant? Anybody? So corn is very complicated to modify in the beginning. So DuPont came up with a machine. Essentially a 38 caliber pistol in a box. You would coat gold pellets with the genetic material, right? And then you would shoot it into the corn plant and hope it got to the parts of the cell that you wanted to get it to, and then you'd grow it out and see what would happen. Very patient process. So I used to write a column in Farm Futures where I would take farmers to see different technologies. And I took a farmer to the University of Minnesota gene lab to look at their gene gun. And I walked in and he says to me, he goes, I thought it would be bigger. I said, well, it's loud, I'll go with that, but it's not bigger. So, but anyway, that was how we started, and we moved over to using crown gall, which is Agrobacterium tumefaciens, which worked fine with broadleaf crops. And they got it bred now to work with corn, so it's a lot simpler to do. But now, we're walking away from that. And we're modifying with gene editing. And what we're having to do there is we can actually put it to either turn it on or turn it off exactly the way we want to, or cut it in. Now, that's fine for us in the crop world. We're excited about that. It's also got potential for the livestock world. The bad news is it started getting bad press just because of the human world. The Chinese have already done it with an infant. It failed. It was a straight test, and they just did it with human cells in the lab recently, and they proved that they could do it, and then they destroyed it. But they haven't, because we're still a long way from getting to where it's going to work for that. But it already works in crops. Pioneer is a short-term program to improve waxy corn. Waxy corn, is a great product. It's got a nice premium in the marketplace, and it comes along with a lot of genetic crap that makes it hard to raise. It doesn't yield that well, and there's other things people don't like about it. But they're coming up with a gene-edited waxy corn that'll have higher yield, and USDA has already signed off on the fact that it's not biotech, because it doesn't have anything new in it. It's just corn into corn, or being modified where it's waxy corn, but they've turned off certain genes that give it bad traits and that type of thing, and that's the work that's being done. Now, a genetic trait like BT is a genetic trait because it expresses a protein, right? So they had to bring something else in. They brought in a soil bacterium to express in BT and corn, and they actually found a soil bacterium to express Roundup resistance. Now there's 100,000 genes in corn. I love the fact that the corn is actually more complicated than a human. There's a way now that they believe they'll be able to find genetic combinations inside the corn that'll do the same thing as the stuff they brought in from the outside. So you might be able to have biotech corn that's not biotech. Now that's still a little ways down the road, but when people complain about GMOs, I'm like, geez, shut up, we're just getting started here. I want to see how this goes. I mean, it's like if they had shut down the Model T when Henry Ford created all those cars, where would we be? We'd probably be a lot happier. Anyway, because they wouldn't text. So this is going to be impactful in 2018 and beyond. You're going to hear more about it, but start paying attention when you hear CRISPR on the radio. Because it's got a cute, what's the public radio called? A cute name. It goes by a cute name, CRISPR. I'm like, oh, for crying out loud. On the other hand, I do prefer Talon. I think that's great, because that doesn't sound vicious at all. And so we'll go with that. But we should pay attention to that and see where the conversation's going, because we need to advocate for that. We're going to need that. Because as Jeannie said in her conversation, we're going to have 10 million people we got to feed by 2050, and we're going to need all of it, all this technology to get there. Yes?
What is Cas9?
That's the part that goes with it. Cas9 is a directed RNA protein. What happens with my basic understanding of this, I'm a journalist, I know just enough to be dangerous. The idea is that it's a guide RNA that has the genes in it that go in, or the turn-off part that goes in and shuts things off or turns things on inside the gene. So Cas9 goes along with CRISPR, and CRISPR stands for something that I'm not going to tell you what it stands for, because I forgot. Anyway. No one will tell you. So the next area that's interesting, and this isn't impacting you now, because these are actually real products on the screen, and something to pay attention to for the future. And I'll get to that a little more in a minute. Sensors are cheap. And you've had sensors in some things you didn't even know you had them in, and now you're going to see more and more of them. Now I've got 3 visual sensors here. This is, of course, the new sensor on the John Deere sprayer. And you know what that does? So with that sensor, The sprayer always knows when it's on the row. It sees the row. Now, why does that matter? Who plants on side hills? How do you spray in row with a sprayer and stay on the row without going like this? The white knuckle drive, that's not my favorite thing. With this system, you put it on auto steering, and the vision system helps with the correction, and it keeps the sprayer on the row even if you had that downhill drift with your planter when you're planting, or uphill, depending on how it goes. And so it tracks the rows better. It sees the row and keeps the sprayer on the row as you're doing auto steering. On the lower right is a new drone sensor. You won't see a picture of a drone in my presentation. Drones are fine, drones are exciting. Drones also take a hell of a lot of work to get all the data, and there's you can actually get more interesting and more accurate data from satellite services. If you really want to get out and do drones for scouting and in-field specific problems, they're fantastic. They're doing whole farm stuff. I'm not sure. I may be wrong. Some of those drones do work with a large area, but sometimes it's just easier to call my guy and go, can you send me over that satellite image? And you get it that way too. So that depends. But this unit for scouting and also doing certain fields, this has an onboard computer. It produces an NDVI map right in the field. It gives you, it pops the NDVI right to your computer right in the air when you're ready to go. So if you're scouting, this is a great tool. And it's a new tool from a company called Centera. All these companies start to sound the same, except Cropzilla. That's a great name. I still like that Cropzilla name. But anyway, so the other thing, an area of sensors that's interesting, and these are visual sensors that are easy to see. You can't see the other sensors, and those are the temperature sensors, the pressure sensors, the load gauges, the load cells, the strain gauges that are in your grain carts, in the engines of your equipment. They're cheap, and they're putting them on. Now remember, your tractor, since about 15 years ago, your tractor's a rolling computer network. And they're just getting better at hooking up more sensors to the network. So what does that mean? Well, for a long time, it just meant that you got really great idiot light signals or a thing that came up on the board with a number you couldn't read, and that was one thing, and you could figure out what the problem was. But what's really happening is this is data coming from those sensors that can be used for predictive analysis. Now, I just did a story with a company, they're in the auto industry, but they're looking at the ag industry. And they do software, predictive software, on predictive failure in cars, and also they capture information on service issues, and so your Ford dealer is a smarter dealer, a smarter maintenance guy because, and the best example, the example that's in my story, I have a Ford F-150 pickup and the air conditioner keeps cutting out. So anybody who knows to fix an air conditioner, to check an air conditioner, what do? You check the compressor, you check your refrigerant, and that's about all you do. They are supposed to be perfect. Well, it turns out, say for example, in the F-150, he just uses as an example, it's not true, but say it's got a problem with a pressure switch that never fails. But for some reason, well, it's a Ford, I'm not sure it never fails, but anyway, there's a pressure switch on this model that is showing up in the data that it fails. Well, this predictive system would say to the service guy, not only do you need to do A, B, and C, but you need to do D, and you need to check the pressure switch, which is a $30 replacement. And the guy fixes it. He's done. The pressure switch is the problem. It wasn't because otherwise you check all the other stuff. The air conditioner was fine. Turns out it's the pressure switch. That won't show up. So that's what predictive analysis does. Now imagine you take all this machine data that these companies have and can predict that. I know that if this is running at this temperature, this thing's going to fail in X amount of hours. I always use the main bearing as an example. If the main bearing temperature rises a certain level, and we know this parameter, that it's going to fail in the next 50 hours, the dealer can call you, and he can say, hey, I got an alert from your tractor, and it looks like your main bearing's going to fail. You don't need to come in right now. You can go ahead and finish what you're doing. You finish planting today or tomorrow, and if you want to bring it in tonight, we'll work on it tonight, because more dealers are running 24-hour shops. We'll fix it when you don't need it. That'll be cheaper. We'll fix it not as an emergency repair. That'll be cheaper too. And you don't lose, you don't create the whole idea here is not to create, is to avoid creating unintended downtime, which is extremely expensive, and keep you in the field more reliably. And this kind of stuff, yes?
What about the rolling computer tractor? What about the longevity of those? And how, with all these sensors and complexity electronics?
Well, right now the warranty failure rates haven't been very high, so they must be pretty good. They ruggedize them pretty well, but it's an issue. But that doesn't make sense. The Genesis tractor, which is 22 years old, is a rolling computer. It was one of the first tractors to implement a CAN bus strategy 22 years ago. So you've been driving them for a while. So how's your failure rate? They're not failing like that. Now, I remember when I first started riding about farm equipment in the early 80s, mid-80s, one of the biggest problems was I was at a seminar and a guy who was involved with repair service for Deere said their biggest problem was that they were getting black boxes from dealers in the field into Waterloo from the tractors, and they checked them and the boxes were fine. What was happening was the dealer would blame the box instead of diagnose the problem and fix the tractor. He would go, oh, that's just the box. Throw the box out, put a new box in, and send the tractor out. And it wasn't that, it was some other connection. Remember too, some of those early systems, and that's the beauty of the CAN bus, those early systems used to have wiring harnesses this big around. Because an individual wire had to go to every individual part of the tractor. That doesn't happen anymore. There's one wire, and everything taps into that network. So yes, that makes it a more reliable thing and also an easier thing to diagnose. But yes, it's an issue. Maintenance is always going to be an issue in a rugged service environment, but they do know how this equipment's used. So that's what we're watching. But sensors are cheap, and that's why we're going to see more of them. Now, I have a different Internet of Things picture than Gene. So this is a guy that did InfoWag, and I want to say something about InfoWag. If you're a farmer and you want to go to InfoWag, don't. There were some there. I ran into a couple with some friends of mine from the United Soybean Board. And I would walk around the room and I would see all these data services that are the best and the biggest and the brightest, and all I wanted to do was get in the middle, go in the corner and get in the field position and just hide, because it's just too much. So the better thing is to just keep paying attention and see who survives. But that's a different story. So this is Durian Rice, and why I'm interested in him in the Internet of Things. I will go back to what Jeannie said. The Internet of Things is connectedness. Your tractor's already connected to the web. If you're on John Deere Operations Center, it's sending crap to the cloud. Same with Case. All of those are connected. They are Internet of Things. But we need more. We need other information. So who has used a moisture, in-soil moisture monitor from Deere or any other company for their irrigation? You have. Other people have as well. That's a moisture sensor. Now, you know with the traditional moisture sensor, the installation process, right? Somebody comes out, you gotta find the right place in the pivot, the right soil that's going to be the best reading for what's really happening in the pivot. You put it in a too sandy area, and you're not, for the price of those things, you're not putting 2 and 3 of them in a pivot, are you? No. This is $120. You can get it for $100 a piece if you buy them in bulk. And you pound them in with a rubber mallet. You read it on a phone to get the QR code to make sure it's enabled. Then you pound it in the ground. It's $100. And here's the deal why it's so cheap. It isn't going to give you the world's most perfect moisture map. It's going to give you just enough. How many of you use an RTK and not using strip till? But do you really think you need RTK?
No, it just makes me feel better.
What's that?
It just makes me feel better.
Makes you feel better, that's right. So that's it, but the idea is, so the question the cool thing about Internet of Things is we're gonna be able to start asking some interesting questions, and I gotta go back to a sensor conversation, something I forgot. But the interesting thing here is that this is just, if you can get 7 sensors, which cost, for $700, that's still cheaper than one of those, right? You can put 7 sensors in a pivot,
Big difference.
and get moisture from all those areas and do that profiling work and maybe stop 2 passes in the spring in a year because you know the moisture profile in the soil, that may be paid for itself. That's the whole idea. What's the payback and how do these systems work? What I like about this, he shows a time lapse of a pro putting in one of the more expensive sensors and it takes 2 hours and all that. And he shows the guy walking around, he's got a bunch of them, and he just goes and he goes, boom, and he just keeps walking along and pounding them on the ground in a lettuce field. So they've got a short one. They also have the deep one to go a little deeper for what you're trying to do. Neat thing about it is, battery runs 5 years, and when you take it out of the ground, it goes into idle, so the battery stays. That's one way you can add value to the battery. Now, what is it about Internet of Things? How does this work? It uses something called a long-range, long-frequency wave. So this thing is beaming, and it'll go 2 to 3 miles with a signal. But it won't get to your farm. It needs a box, and that's the trick. There's the box called the Senate makes this box. There's a couple other companies, which is essentially a cellular modem. It's not sending that much data, so it's a cellular modem. So it picks up the information from all these sensors into the cellular modem, and that's the backhaul to the cloud, so you get to your information. So it makes gathering more field information. We talk about a sensor in every plant. This is what's going to happen. This is the kind of stuff you're talking about. Lower cost, higher numbers, better data. And actually better data because you're collecting the samples. I mean, it's great to, listen, the moisture samplers that are out there now are fantastic. I mean, I work with some of those and they get you good information and make good decisions. But more is better in some ways. So that's the way. One thing I want to back up on sensors, and I showed vision sensors, and I get one. And the interesting thing on that is, the vision sensors are getting really good. Besides the John Deere unit, tomorrow morning, if I get my act together, on our website, we'll have a story about the See and Say sprayer. See and Spray sprayer. It's hard to say. Sounds like a game. The See and Spray sprayer. Anybody heard of it? It's a company out of California, and they have come up with a system where they can actually tell the difference between a crop and a weed. And as it goes through the field, that's the only thing it sprays. Now let me talk about some of the questions that kind of technology brings, and that goes back to some of the technology questions you're going to have from some of this other stuff that that'll be raised. Because I was talking to the guy at InfoWag, and then he's come back to me, and that's why I'm writing the story. You can spray just the weed. So I'm sitting with a farmer, one of the few farmers at InfoWag, and he says to me, he says, well, wait a minute. If I spray just the weed, do I have to use a herbicide? Question. Methylated soybean oil, biodiesel, organic, breaks down, biodegradable, right? Very natural, kills anything you spray it on. And it's hard to get tolerant to the biodiesel. If that happens, we have a different problem. So, again, think about that for a minute. If you could tank that baby with biodiesel and just spray the weeds, and that's all it sprays. It looks like an inkjet. When it sprays the weed, it's a box. You'll see the pictures tomorrow, but anyway, it's a box. I would have shown you a picture, but I didn't get it till late this morning. It's a box right around that weed. But then it comes up with a different question, and I asked it at this meeting. Who here in the room has heard of Palmer Amaranth? You know, well, you're from Michigan. You got it from the dairy farmers. Thank you, dairy industry. If the palmer is in the row, you could hit that palmer, but it might hit a cotton plant, or it might hit a soybean plant. Are you willing to give up one crop plant to get rid of a Palmer amaranth? So we're asking, these are questions you have to ask yourself. Do you mind taking a little hit on the crop in the row? Because you get all these weeds in between the rows, that's no big deal. But what about that crop in the row? If that weed's right in the row, and it can be pretty precise. And if you use the right herbicides, that's not a problem. And this will be reducing herbicide costs. But if you got Palmer, frankly, you want to flame it, but that's a different story. The idea then becomes this another question you might want to ask. Now, of course, you can use Liberty Link and you can use all those texts and just spray it, and then you can reduce your herbicide costs tremendously. You are just spraying the weed. Now, if you have a big, it's going to be, I saw some great fields of water hemp in Iowa this year, and it's basically going to be on all the time. That's a different story, but basically the idea is that you would just be targeting the weed, then you can decide if there are other chemical strategies. And that's what some of these technologies will bring to you, is you anticipate where these are going. You might want to anticipate what you could do differently than you've ever done before. And that's kind of exciting to me anyway, as I look at some of this stuff. So the same when you look at Jurian's Sensoterra soil moisture sensor. If I could put 6 or 7 of those in the pivot versus one $2,000 sensor, $5,000 sensor I can only afford to put every 3 pivots. Can I do better with my water? Am I going to be demanded to do better with my water? I know they want me to do more with my fertilizer, or more with less. So if we're asking the question, if I'm asking a question, somebody else is going to ask the question. So that's one of the things you have to look at when you look at technology too, is what kind of questions does it raise for your operation and what might that mean? And then skip the problem and go for the solution. Find the thing that makes the benefit for your operation. This is the other area where sensors are making a difference. On the left is a Bosch weed killer. It was at Agritechnica in 2015. And these bars across the top, these posts right here, see these are fake weeds, it's a demo. But basically it sees the weed and it punches it. Sounds silly, right? Sounds a little silly. But you're using a labor model. Nobody has to be in this machine. It can run all day and all night punching weeds. So how is that as a potential for killing weeds? Because you know the best way to kill a weed is to get a weed is a small weed, right? And you keep punching it into the ground, it's not gonna come up. Now that's not perfect, but that's one of the ways that they look at technology. The robot tractor on the right, of course, was a big hit at the Farm Progress Show last year, and I'm pretty sure it'll be there this year. And that was where that last sensor I had on the visual sensor, this is the LiDAR radar system on the front of that tractor, which sees forward, sees around itself, and sees behind itself, so it knows always where it is. When you think about robot tractors and robotics, there's a couple areas that I think we'll see trends in. The Bosch robot on the left, I would call more in the spider class. The tractor on the right, I would call in the elephant class. We will be able to custom tailor what robots do for us. So if I could send out 6 or 7 things into a field to run all the time, just have to charge, like a Roomba, they'll have to go and charge every once in a while, and they will be like weed Roombas. They could just go out and kill weed somehow. Either they're going to shoot the weed, punch the weed, pull the weed. There may be all kinds of different ways they do things. But if I had 5 or 6 of those going all the time, and I would say, well, these will be in this field 2 days, and then they'll load themselves onto the flatbed, and we'll take them to the next field and put them back in the field, and they'll go out again. And obviously there's timing on weeds you'd have to work out, but that's one idea. The other one, of course, and there's two, the elephant model is, of course, a big machine doing big work, and that combine will never be a spider, it will always be an elephant. But the idea then is, and I've had a couple farmers bring this up to me, who wants leader-follower technology? You know what I'm talking about? I'm in the combine, I'm in the S700 Deere combine, brand new one, and behind me are 3 other combines, and they're following me. And then there's one really crazy guy with a grain cart. No. Actually, we played around with this and we did the math. So the average grain tank size is about 350 bushels, right? And we run around that. But with a following combine, I don't need a cab or person support. I just need to think. So I can put a 700 bushel grain tank in the following combine, right? So you could tend that with 1,000 bushel grain cart and machine sync. Think about it for a minute. One guy can handle 2 combines to get it back to the truck. It's close. Kind of play with it a little bit. But again, you're not adding too much labor. You're actually doing twice the work with about the same amount of labor. So these are the things that you start to think about. You'll have to start thinking about. It's like, well, yeah, but I got like 2 $700,000 combines. Well, that's a different issue. Just skip that problem and move on. But I think that's the whole idea behind this is that you're going to have questions ahead for your farm you never thought of before. And some of this stuff's going to start coming up in the next 2 to 3 years.
Is this the kind of thing Elon Musk is warning us about?
What's that?
Artificial intelligence?
Well, no, only if that combine eats you. I understand. Doesn't worry about the robot overlords. This from a guy who's got a car with autopilot? I don't know. He's making good news with that. I think we should be aware of it. Machine learning is a big deal. Machine learning is something we should be aware of. What it learns and how it learns. It sounds very science fiction-y, but go back to Preddy, that software I was talking about that's predictive. It learns when it sees data about machine failures and makes decisions based on that. Let me go back and talk about Watson. You saw that video about trashing a supercomputer after 2 years. Well, Watson's been around a little longer than that, but they've been rebuilding Watson. Watson reads every medical document ever published and reads them every day. And actually finds diagnoses that doctors never thought of because it sees the latest research before the doctors do. Because doctors are human. I think it was Lowell Catlett who once made a comment. He says, we publish 40,000 pages of new research every day. If you think you're keeping up with the literature, you're lying to yourself. So that's really what you're talking about. But a computer can read 40,000 pages a day. So yes, you bring up an interesting question about that, and we need to be aware of it. But I don't fear technology. We need to embrace it in a way that we can keep control of it. We're going to end up with the 3 laws of robotics. I don't care what anybody says. Now, I'm a science fiction fan, too. Isaac Asimov's 3 laws of robotics, right? First law is a robot can never hurt a human. Never. It's a built-in, coded, never hurt a human. So stop watching Westworld. And then both of the second and third law play off of the first law. That the robot has to protect the human, and the robot can't hurt other robots if it hurt another human.
There are hackers in the world.
What's that?
There are hackers in the world.
I understand that, but then that's another issue. If I lived in fear all the time, I just go back to that fetal position thing I was talking about. You bring up a good point, and we need to be aware of it. But the way you're talking, then I can't use anything. That's the other problem. So that's the challenge. But I think the opportunity for some of this. Look, you're already driving a robot tractor. I was in a brand new Steiger with a CVT transmission a couple weeks ago, and it's got end of row turning, and I don't have to touch a thing. As a matter of fact, I sat in the combine with Leo Vogt, the head of tech at Case IH, and we talked for 15 minutes while the tractor drove itself around the field. I was in the driver's seat, I started it, and it went down, and it turned, and it went back, and it turned, and we just rode in a circle talking about other stuff. But while we did this, it's a whole different world. We hear stories about farmers with long rows going to Red Box every morning before long days of field work. I don't want to know about that. But, sure, I can pay attention to my planner. Anyway, but the automation's already here. I like it that there's somebody in the cab right now. My concern is some of the logistics. How am I going to get that tractor? How do I get that robot? Have you ever seen it park this robot tractor? There's video from last year on the Facebook page for us for Harvest Days. There's a little tiny seat with a little tiny steering wheel, and they have to back it up into position because it really isn't a robot. It's a demo. It's not really a robot tractor yet. But think about how you're going to get that to the field and how's it going to move. And my favorite one is I'm going to put that in there and I'm going to put a planter on it. And please don't have that thing call me 5 minutes before the planter's empty. Please have it call me at least an hour before the planter's empty so I can get out there to tend it. That's the next thing. So that's the other part of this that gets interesting. So as we look at sensors and automation and how those are coming together, with the Internet of Things, there's a little bit of convergence on some of this stuff because it's all cloud-based. Then we had a conversation at lunch. One of the challenges of cloud-based computing is that your internet sucks in the country. It really does. And so you need to be screaming at your congressmen, congresswomen, senators, and I'm from Minnesota. They both are aware of this issue, and just keep screaming about this infrastructure thing. This is as important as roads and bridges, long term. I'm not sure if it's more because when I'm carrying 1,000 pounds, 1,000 bushels of grain across the bridge, I want that bridge fixed. I want that bridge working. It's important. I'm with you. It's not more important than a bridge, but it's close. But it's gotten to that point. When you look at every corn plant, it's a certain amount of data. If I'm going to put a sensor on that corn plant, how much data am I sending? Yes?
If you put the right sensor on the bridge, you wouldn't have to worry about it.
And they should be doing that. And some of that's starting to happen. So yeah, sensors in the road, we're going to see more of that kind of thing. And then when they're hacked, I don't know what's going to happen. So, but it's part of an issue that we have to worry about too, is where the tech goes. But my take on it is that we're moving in some interesting directions that, and remember, the strawberry picker, robust strawberry picker is kind of cool. That's out in California. There's one in Plant City, Florida. Has anybody ever had strawberries in Plant City, Florida? If you haven't, do that during the season. That's the best strawberry you'll ever have. They are working on a row-based harvester there for the same reason. They can't get labor. But remember, the large round baler was invented because we couldn't get kids to do small hay bales. Everything is about the lack of labor, or trying to get labor out of the cost equation since we started farming. So I forget what the horses getting rid of the people. For me, the fifth thing, and I'm not getting into the business analytics, I'm looking at crop modeling and crop analytics. This will impact you this year and next year, soon. This is a picture of the new field forecasting crop modeling tool from Winfield United. I think one of the biggest conclusions they reached is stop fall fertilizing, but that's a different story. What this is this dark part is the plant, the corn plant. The red part says that corn plant is in nitrogen stress. This is how much nitrogen it really needed. This is how much it's going to need. This is where they are. It says right there, you can't read it, it says 299 bushel yield potential, going to yield 210. They figure it's 11 bushel loss, they're looking at potentially a 78 bushel hit because they didn't get the fertilizer where it needed to be. Now that's still a model, it's not perfect, but if you could put another 40 bushels on that, because you had nitrogen there at the right time, you would. And that's part of what this is about. But let's go back 5 to 10 years. No, let's go back to Al Myers and 25 years ago. I love yield monitors. I do. I think they're great technology. We have GPS. They make great pictures. Woohoo. For 20 years, woohoo was what I thought, because it was like, this is really interesting information. It's from last year. Last 5 years, we started to talk about something else, and that's exciting to me. In-season application, in-season tactics. I can learn stuff now, whether it's a drone sensor, whether it's a satellite map, whether it's an NEDI position, whether it's something out of his tissue test, I can learn something. And before about 5 years ago, we didn't think that mattered. Then the Iowa Soybean Association did a test about 4 years ago, I think it was. They had a nitrogen stress cornfield, and they went into it right before tassel, and they applied 28%, in-row 28%. And they put 50 bushels on that crop. 50 bushels an acre on that crop because they hit it right when it needed most of the nitrogen, and it was going to head into grain fill. Turns out, if you do crap in the middle of the season, the plant will respond. We used to think we put all that nitrogen on in the fall with a little N-serve and get out there and plant and kill the weeds. We got all we got out of that plant. How many bushels an acre can you get out of what's the top we can get out of corn?
600.
You say 600, but how much have we really got? What's the highest we ever really got? You know, the record from last year? 525. Randy Dowdy, Georgia, 525. So you're right, 600. And as Fred Beal will say from the University of Illinois, the minute you plant it, it's all downhill from there. The highest potential, and he's not wrong. I know, Fred's a good friend. But if there's things we can do in season to put yield on that crop, we don't know what they are. This kind of model is going to show us that and show us when and where we can put it on. Now, you know, Whitfield's got a lot of data on their answer plots, and they use both their hybrids and other hybrids. So they've got a lot of information, and that's what they're using for this. But this can only get better. As they use tissue testing data in season and put it back into the crop model, it changes what the crop model says is going to happen during the year. They're not the only ones doing this. We know that Encirca's got their nitrogen model. It's an excellent tool because they spent all that money on those new soil maps from Missouri that are great. And then we know Climate's field view nitrogen tool, and it's the same thing. It's like, when do I need nitrogen? Where do I put it? It's about getting it right the first time. And I'd rather embrace this now on my farm before EPA comes in and tells me I need to embrace it. Because I joked at the beginning, but one of the things that did come out of this work that they've been doing the last couple of years, and they work with a French company to build the crop model, is that fall nitrogen is just not a good investment. Not great news for all those co-ops that put a lot of fall nitrogen on, and Whitfield loves showing this map to those guys. And I understand that this is a challenge. Yes.
How do we as producers instill the idea that these models and putting it on just in time is great, but logistically, how do we get the work done?
That is the challenge of this information. It's like, now I've got information that I never had before, and you kind of sit there, like I did with the old yield maps. So what? So what you need to look at is, what are you going to do in the next 5 years? Looking at your equipment purchases and your practices to see if you can capture some of it, maybe not all of it. Now, of course, the first answer is Y drops. That was the thing that made a big difference. And Greg's not the only guy selling Y drops. I mean, New Holland put out their own for the Miller sprayer, and then they're up. Basically, it's a pipe with two tubes. You know, really. How technical can that be? What's the patent on that? It's a pipe with two tubes. So that's what I'm going with. But that's one simple move. That if you could go into corn, it depends on how tall your sprayer is, but if you can go into corn that's this high and hit it with 28% at a time when it might need it, rather than putting it on bare ground, I mean, that's a possibility. And it's a timing issue too.
Well, yeah, you're from Minnesota, but I'm from Minnesota. It's just, we don't get the weather to do it right at the exact time.
Right.
We're not in the southern states where we got unlimited hours.
Right. The southern states suck at raising corn. That's the best news. Sorry, just saying. You're new to it, you'll get it. You'll get there. I'm sorry, but we do really well in Minnesota and Iowa, so we know what to do. But you're right, that becomes the management challenge. So this is great. This is information you probably don't even want at first. But it's just absorb the information and say, okay, what could I do differently? And one of the small differences is, what if I put the right kind of urea and block right at the beginning of the season rather than last fall, that is a very slow release? And there's some good tech out there. Agric's got some good tech and some other people do. So that's just a way to think about that.
His question, does this kind of stuff help drive farm size smaller?
No, I don't think so. I think I can't imagine that we would because we don't have enough farmers. It drives, go ahead.
But if you're a large producer, and you have 2 days to get 40
I know.
acres done, how do you do it?
I don't have that answer. I mean, I think, again, you're asking good questions,
Which
which
democratic change?
we could have a Democratic change. But part of this is, it puts pressure back on the dealers to figure out how they can have the right equipment to put stuff on too, to help with this. That's obviously their, they have, we live in the land of the 2 largest co-ops in the country, right? So we get land lakes and CHS, yeah.
Do they also optimize the margin? Profit margin?
They're supposed to. That's what this is supposed to be built about, optimizing our profit margin. But you're right, that's another question. So the other question is,
Everybody optimizes on yield.
yeah, optimize on yield, that's right. Are you optimizing, he brings up a good question. Is this built on optimizing on margin or on yield? Well, right now I'll tell you it's based on yield. So the next question you have to ask yourself is, if I could put 30 pounds of 28% or 50 pounds of 28% on
$3 corn.
at $3 corn, would I do it? And the answer would be, no, it looks really good at 205. So that's an in-season application that you have to. I have taken up my time, but I just hope I got your brains on a little bit and kept you awake after lunch. Thank you. You can reach me, that email address, and come to the Farm Progress Show. We're gonna have a great time next week. Thank you very much.